While their feats of evil may not be as noteworthy as the villains from other studios, Sony Animation's baddies can still be fairly threatening and competent in their actions. But of course, that just makes their eventual defeats all the more satisfying, at least for the most part. But we have to ask the question, which Sony Animation villain got the shortest and most painful end of the stick? I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is Sony Animation villain Fates, gruesome to most gruesome. First up, we have a short section dedicated to the villains who barely had to face any punishment for their crimes. These are the ones who got away with it. Easily starting this tier off is Hotel Transylvania 3's Erica Van Helsing. Despite spending nearly 2/3 of the film trying to kill Dracula and helping her grandfather with his plan to destroy all monsters, Erica doesn't really get punished for any of her crimes. Yes, she saves Drac from the Kraken and does apologize somewhat, and apparently that's all you really need. The other monsters, including Mavis, instantly forgive her and welcome her into their group with open arms. And Erica even gets to continue being with Drac, who proposes at the end of the film. For facing no consequences whatsoever, Erica is who we immediately think of when we think of Sony villains who totally got away with their villainy. For our runner-up, we have Zeta from the Angry Birds movie 2. It's arguably even more insulting that Zeta barely got any consequences, given that the damage and destruction she caused with her lava balls was much more devastating than anything Erica did or tried to do. But despite this, she ends up getting to live on Bird Island with her daughter as well as with her old flame, Mighty Eagle, who she ends up marrying.
You better not wink at me, don't you?
Now, to be fair, she does face a bit of consequences for her actions, namely that her base ends up getting destroyed and her daughter, Debbie, was nearly crushed by rubble as the base is coming down. But since Mighty Eagle was able to save Debbie, this was more of a wake-up call for Zeta than anything else. Additionally, Zeta didn't really seem to enjoy living in the Arctic anyway, so we can't imagine her being too upset about living with her family on a tropical island. Finishing off this tier is another Hotel Transylvania baddie, Abraham Van Helsing. When it comes to his grandmaster plan regarding monsters and their destruction, it was nearly successful. Unfortunately for him, he didn't account for the power of the Macarena. After Van Helsing loses control of both the Kraken and his own mechanical body, he nearly falls to his death. In the end though, he is saved by Dracula and, much like Erica, is essentially welcomed into the Dracula family despite all he tried to do. Honestly, it's a surprise that Erica even wanted to keep a relationship with him, so perhaps Van Helsing should consider himself lucky for multiple reasons.
Not just about you!
Alive and not wanting to get on any monster's bad sides, Van Helsing then promises to give all the monsters a full refund on their cruise. So we suppose that's kind of a punishment of sorts. Still, given that he gets to live at a fancy hotel for free, and thus doesn't really need all that money, it's hard to feel like any justice was served. Next up, we have the painful humiliation fates. Although not too noteworthy in the grand scheme of things, these guys still either lost their reputation or lost their power in a particularly embarrassing way. Starting off, we're ranking Chef Quasimodo from the first Hotel Transylvania movie. Compared to the other Hotel Transylvania antagonists, Quasimodo didn't really get to do too much, nor was he much of an actual threat. Though he tried to eat Johnny, it didn't take long for Dracula to find and free the human. When Quasi tried to fight back, he was frozen by Dracula's powers. He does get a bit of petty revenge later on, being the one to reveal that Johnny truly was a human, but he still remains frozen until the end of the film, and we see him getting licked by Wayne's werewolf puppies. We're sure that he was unfrozen eventually, but given that the hotel now allows humans and obviously wouldn't want Quasi trying to eat any of them, it's safe to say that the hunchback was probably out of a job. Moving on, next is the insane hunting enthusiast from Open Season, Shaw. While he and his fellow hunters are able to put up one heck of a fight against the forest animals, it eventually comes down to just Shaw and Boog. When it looks like Shaw has the upper hand, Elliot runs in front of the shot, making it look like he's been killed. Seeing this, Boog is angered enough to fight back and ends up tying Shaw up with his own gun. This then allows Shaw to be beaten up by the animals.
Somebody forgot to flush!
This, combined with the fact that he's no longer able to hunt those animals, just makes for a pretty satisfying end for this guy. Following him is the arrogant penguin, Tank. Throughout the movie, Sir surfs up, Tank is shown to be a complete bully and narcissist that's obsessed with his trophies. He's willing to do anything to win, and even when he's not out on the waves, he's treating everyone, even cute little baby penguins, like absolute dirt.
I love holding the ladies.
When his bad sportsmanship finally catches up with him, Tank is officially disqualified from the surf-off, though he still tries to take the trophy for himself. A brief scuffle with the island's group of baby penguins leads to it getting broken, leaving Tank both humiliated and trophy-less. It's another really satisfying fate that, while not too gruesome in the grand scheme of things, still fits well with the character who rightfully deserves it. Finishing off our Hotel Transylvania villains, we have Bella, essentially being the leader of Vlad's giant bat army. He does what he can to try and rid the hotel of its humans, even if it means threatening literal children. Though he and his army can't outfight Dennis, Mavis, or Dracula, he still tries to kill the powerless Johnny in revenge. Before he can though, he's stopped by Vlad, who uses his powers to shrink him to a tiny size, being small enough that Wayne's pups are able to grab and lick him, much to his dismay. We don't really know what happens to Bella after this, but whether he stays as a chew toy for the pups or manages to escape, it's safe to say that all the power he may have had at Vlad's castle is gone. A very cruel fate indeed, though not necessarily one that's unwarranted. Next, we're going to be ranking the Emoji Movie's Smiler. For a character like her, losing both her ability to control others and her looks has got to be a pretty painful double whammy. While she does try to take out Jailbreak with one of her antivirus robots, High Five is able to push it over, leading to Smiler getting her teeth broken.
We were just gonna come looking for you.
Later on, we see her in the loser lounge wearing braces. It's a simple punishment, but as we said, it works for a villain like her, as losing both her power over Textopolis and her perfect teeth was surely a painful blow. Finishing off this section is Spider-Verse's Kingpin. Compared to the other villains in the first Spider-Verse film, Kingpin sort of gets off easy, in that any physical damage is limited to getting zapped by Miles' Spider Shock power before getting thrown into his Collider's kill switch, ending his plans once and for all.
It's not always about the money, Spider-Man.
He later gets webbed up for the police to arrest, which we're sure was pretty humiliating for him. Honestly, the more painful part of this fate is that after everything Kingpin did, he now knows that it simply isn't possible for him to bring back the family he loved. Additionally, while a guy as rich and powerful as him probably wouldn't stay in jail for very long, the fact that he still got arrested had to be a pretty significant blow to his pride. Taking another short break before we get to our most gruesome fates, we'd like to touch on the unknown fates. While it's a good chance these villains ended up with some pretty gruesome ends, we can't completely say for sure whether or not they died, hence why they can't be in our top category. First in this tier is Mayor Shelbourne from the first Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. In a sense, Shelbourne was able to get away with his crimes, in that he escapes the island and avoids getting arrested or punished for his part in nearly destroying both the island and the world with giant food. Unfortunately for him, his gluttony ended up being his downfall, and we last see him being completely stranded in the middle of the ocean after eating his boat. Given that he'd likely be unable to swim anywhere once his boat was completely gone, it's safe to say that Shelbourne probably drowned, or at the very least, was left treading water for quite a while before eventually being rescued. But even then, he'd still be at an incredibly unhealthy weight, and given his reputation at that point, would likely be unable to get into another position of power. In other words, no matter which way you slice it, this former mayor probably wouldn't have much of a chance at any sort of happy ending. From local government to royalty, next is Queen Victoria from Pirates Band of Misfits. Though she puts up a good fight, this queen ends up going through a lot during the film's climax. After getting roughed up during her fight with the pirate captain, her entire boat is destroyed thanks to an explosive mix of vinegar and baking soda. Though she tries to take Polly and kill the pirate captain, Polly's able to fight back, biting her right in the eye. She then ends up accidentally ripping a hole in her airship, hindering her own escape as she watches all the pirates make it to safety. It's both a painful and humiliating end for the queen.
Oh my.
To make things worse, we see Victoria stranded on an island where, ironically enough, the rare animals that she and her fellow royals had planned on eating were preparing to eat her. We don't know if she actually gets eaten or if she just has to deal with being stranded on an island and being forced to live as prey, but either way, it's a case for adding insult to injury. Moving on, we have our second to last Spider-Verse villain, Dr. Octopus. Being only a henchman to the film's big bad, Olivia doesn't get too many scenes to shine, though the scenes she does get are certainly extremely memorable. One of these scenes, funnily enough, is her defeat. While we're able to get an epic face-off between Doc Ock and our three main spider people, the battle ends sort of anticlimactically when Liv ends up getting run over by a flying truck, much to everyone's shock. We don't know if this actually killed her or just knocked her out, as we don't see her for the rest of the fight, nor do we see her getting arrested later on.
All we have to do is kill a couple of spiders.
Still, she's pretty durable and pretty smart, meaning that she would still know how to take care of herself. Heck, for all we know, she could have been sucked into another dimension, given that the collider was still active at the time. Either way, it's a pretty painful end for her. We're ending our unknown fates tier with the snake, Ludador. Now, this snake's a pretty minor threat, all things considered. The characters really only have to deal with him during their trip through the swamp, but while he's not a huge part of the story, his size and intimidation factor still allows him to be a true danger for Vivo and Gabby. That is until Vivo is able to turn Ludador's size into a disadvantage. With his acrobatic abilities, Vivo ends up tying Ludador around a tree, making it easy for him, Gabby, and the Girl Scouts to escape.
Absolutely nothing.
Given how well Vivo tied him up, we feel like it'd take Ludador quite a while to get himself free, if he's even able to at all. If not, we're sure you could figure out what would happen in that case. Though starvation isn't exactly bloody, it's still a pretty harsh way to go. Hence why we had to rank him here towards the bottom of this section, even if we don't know for sure if that's what happened to him. Finally, we've reached our final tier, the gruesome deaths. Clearly the most painful and most definitive fates for these particular Sony animated villains. Entering our top 5, we have the Prowler, aka Aaron Davis. Being our final Spider-Verse villain for the time being, Aaron has the most gruesome and definitely the most sad death of the bunch. Being the Kingpin's assassin for hire, Aaron's job is to kill whoever he's told to kill, no matter what. But of course, when his target ends up being his nephew, Aaron just can't do it. This leads to Kingpin shooting him, and though it's a fairly slow and painful death, at the very least, Aaron is still able to say goodbye to Miles, telling him to keep going.
Hello, Mr. Fisk.
In this sense, it's able to be just a bit bittersweet instead of just being tragic. There's also the fact that while Kingpin may have been the one to shoot him, it was still a knowing sacrifice on Aaron's part, given that he knew what would happen if he refused an order. This is the main reason why we can't place his death any lower, as the other deaths are much more painful as far as we're concerned. Just outside the podium of gruesomeness, we have Chester V from the second Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs film. After failing to defeat Flint and his friends, Chester V is left at a disadvantage when he tries to escape, although he tries to save himself, first with his holograms, and then by tucking into his turtle shell-like vest to avoid being torn up by the giant food processor. He's finally stopped for good when he gets eaten alive by Cheese Spider.
Will be deemed.
Now, normally being eaten alive would be ranked much lower, but since the Cheese Spider doesn't seem to have any sharp teeth, we aren't sure how painful getting eaten by it would actually be. Additionally, with how quickly the Cheese Spider eats Chester, only taking a few seconds, we'd argue that such a fast death would be slightly more merciful than one that was slower and drawn out. Still, we can't deny that getting eaten by a giant burger is still one of the scarier ways to go. For our bronze medal of gruesomeness, we're giving it to the Hunter from the Star. During the film's climax, the Hunter is mostly seen as the final boss after Bo the donkey is able to fight off the Hunter's two dogs. But while he's much stronger than Bo, the Hunter still eventually ends up on the side of a cliff, leading to him falling to his doom. It's a simple death, but one that manages to be pretty painful nonetheless, whether you're focusing on the fear that the hunter likely felt on the way down or the actual impact once he hit the ground. It's enough to land a spot in the bottom 3. Getting our silver medal of gruesomeness is, ironically, the man with the golden touch, Pockets from Wish Dragon. After briefly fighting Din, Pockets corners him and prepares to hit him with his golden hand, only for Long to put himself in the way. This catches Pockets off guard, giving Din the chance to push him off Long. When this happens, Pockets accidentally touches himself, causing him to turn into a gold statue.
If I may ask.
Now, this is bad enough, as the fear and pain that had likely come from being turned into gold is pretty gruesome to think about. But to make things even worse for Pockets, he ends up hitting the ground instead of the water, leading to him being smashed into pieces. It's hard to say whether or not he felt that crash, but it's certainly an ending that you can't help but wince at when you watch it. Finally, our gold medal of gruesomeness is going to Pal. Being just a cell phone, there are plenty of ways that Pal could have died or been defeated. It's safe to say though that the ending that they ended up going with is more on the gruesome end of things. When Katie manages to finally land a hit on Pal, it looks like she's going to land in a pool. Then, after bouncing off of an umbrella, it looks like she may escape. But thanks to an assist from Manchi, Pal ends up getting dropped into a glass of water. We see her panic and painfully glitch out before finally exploding, stopping her robot army for good.
Bring me pizza!
Given that she's the only villain on our list who explodes, which is certainly one of the more fiery ways to go, it seemed unlikely that we'd pick anyone else for our top spot. Add in all the water-induced pain she had to deal with prior to exploding, and you easily have Sony Animation's most gruesome villain fate. But let us know in the comments section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us what we should cover next. Make sure to hit that notification bell and binge our other most gruesome videos. But most importantly, stay wicked.